Well, good evening, everybody. I'm here to talk about sports dynasties, especially the decline of sports dynasties, and a lot of people don't really root for them anymore, only because of what they turned out to be. For example, if you take Tom Brady and the Patriots, when he was playing for the Patriots, they would win all the time, and they were a dynasty, but also at the same time, a lot of people kind of started rooting against them because they weren't the underdog anymore. That would be the same case with the New York Yankees, who from I would say the 1920s until really the 1990s kind of dominated in terms of World Series wins in baseball, with the exception of some years in between. Some of the wilderness years for the Yankees, shortly after I would say Mickey Mantle retired. um, everybody has their own feelings about sports dynasties. Everybody thinks of some sports dynasties as positive, and they would think of some sports dynasties as negative. Case in point, for example, if we were to take the 1970s Montreal Canadiens, everybody loved them all, especially inside and outside of Montreal who followed hockey. So it really depends on the person. And well, one, the economics have changed. Um, Back in the 70s and the 60s, and especially if we're talking like older sports dynasty eras like the 1920s Yankees or the 1950s Yankees, 1960s Yankees, 1970s Canadians, we always talk about they were able to win because the payroll was essentially the same at all times. It wasn't like it is now, where where free agency skyrockets once you prove your worth as an athlete, and especially if you win a championship. So it really depends on the situations, uh, and in some circumstances, the game changes. If you take a look at from when Gordie Howe played with the Red Wings in the 50s to when Gretzky played. And this is something this is something even Wayne Gretzky even said. It depends, it's just different eras and it's hard to compare. So that's another thing. So the game changes. The hockey now, for example, is much more physical, much players are much more stronger as opposed to 25, 30, 40, 45, 50 years ago, when players were much different and players smoked a lot more. Nowadays, nutrition's a very serious thing for a lot of athletes. And coaching also changed as well. If you take a look at John Wooden, who was a great basketball coach, it really depends who the coach is. John Wooden always emphasized the system when he was a coach at UCLA, when he coached the UCLA Bruins to many NCAA titles. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of his players, and then he went off to a great 20 plus year NBA career. So it really depends on who um, you're talking to, and what kind of player you're thinking about, because it is, as a sports fan and as someone who has researched a lot of these things, I have noticed that it is a very unfair to compare players from different eras, because circumstances were different. They get paid, what they got paid back then is different relative to what they get paid now. What the diets they had in those days, it is very different. So these days, I would have to say sports dynasties, while they are present, it's it's not as prevalent as it once was. It is because a lot of people, a lot of players, a lot of athletes, a lot of coaching, training staff, they've become much more professional, and with that, uh, it, uh, it changes into an attitude shift, a mindset shift. It's not, you know. I remember Buck Martinez said on an interview in baseball, who's who he played for the Blue Jays at one point, for the Toronto Blue Jays, and he now does TV for them. He even says economics have changed. Back then, everybody was a little more determined to win, only because they would get paid more. Now, he wasn't knocking players of today's era. He's just saying the mindset is different. So if a player makes a bunch of multi-million dollars now, it's really different for someone who just who played sports at a time, who played pro sports at a time, when he had to work a second job. So it really, really depends. And also soccer, that's just a whole nother ball of wax where the World Cup, for example, Germany dominated for a long time, Brazil dominated for a long time, Argentina dominated for a long time. But over time, everybody's becoming different. Everybody's learning from one another. Take a look at Canada in their soccer program. Canada is going to host the World Cup in 2026. Even they have a bit of a promising team now. The men's and the women's have been promising for a really long time. It really depends what era you're talking about. It depends um what kind of caliber athletes they were. And that's not to say an athlete, a Babe Ruth from the 20s, is different than someone like Aaron Judge today who plays for the Yankees. There are different trainings, different, but also at the same time there are different. Those are different eras. Babe Ruth had to win to get paid more money. Aaron Judge, while still I am sure determined to win, it's different because he gets paid a lot more money than the average folks today. Babe Ruth got paid a little more and still he had to work a second job, as an example. So it really depends who you're talking to. And what I've learned is that there's a decline of sports dynasties because circumstances have changed, economics have changed, and there are some more recent dynasties, but they're much more limited in terms of how many championships they won, and that is because the game changed, the economics changed. That's the Golden State Warriors of the NBA or Tampa Bay Lightning of the NHL. Who both franchises have been very successful, but it depends on what. But also at the same time, it's much more competitive and there's much more parity, meaning every team is more equal now in terms of rankings in their leagues. So there are many things to consider. Have a great day.